All the work that's here in the gallery is sort of a continuation of a series of work I started a couple years after I went to Iceland on a Fulbright grant. I was there for a full year, and out of that experience came Implications, which is the large-scale piece here on the back wall, and also Precipitous. Those are sort of directly influenced by my experience in Iceland. And then over the past few years, this is from 2015, and that book is as well, and then the rest are from 2016, so they're really fresh just from this summer, and this is the first time I've shown some of these newer pieces over here. But they're all variations on the book form, so everything in the gallery space. Obviously the content, it's about landscape, it's about how humans look at landscape, but then the form is all inkjet prints. So I find that I'm limited by fine art printmaking to make things gigantic, so I've started working with inkjet because I can get really big, and then I also work pretty much exclusively now with book forms in a variety of different orientations, whether they fall off the wall or they're oriented like little tents on the floor or on the wall, but all explorations with the book and thinking about how the book contains a world and is sort of this knowledge document or container of information. And I like working with the book because I know so much of the world is digital now, but I really believe civilization for so long has really revered books and that they've always been important documents throughout our history as people. And so I really think that working with the book form, there's something really wonderful and magnificent about using it and still trying to kind of make that art form come to life today. So, what questions might I answer for you all?
I see a tsunami here.
A tsunami?
Because of our Cascadia Fault. Being so close to us, just the rhythm of it. Of course it would be longer, more threatening, but the colors are just magnificent, the shadows and everything else.
Yeah, this book was a little different move for me. And I think as an artist of like, how can I keep playing in my studio? I mentioned those kind of 4 Ps of like practice, patience, persistence, and play. Those are the things in my studio I'm always thinking about. And so play is a really big part of my art practice. So for me, this was, kind of came out of like playing with accordions, miniatures, and playing with spray paint, and thinking about color, and wanting to add. These are often so subdued, these other pieces, and kind of quiet. Maybe those are less quiet. But I wanted to use that neon orange because I find neon to be so alarming. It's sort of a color that's a warning sign usually. And in this case, it also to me kind of looks like fire, like it creates this bright, bright glow underneath all the books. And they do look like a wave, so they kind of reference that. They also look like little tents, like a little encampment, a little glow coming out from the tents. And then there's also the image of this sort of fragmented, blurred landscape that you're moving through. That as you spin around the whole piece, I was thinking about how the viewer, the image changes and it breaks apart as you move around to the sides, and then the image comes back together as you come and face it head on. So thinking about that idea of fragmenting images, breaking them apart, is something that I think is kind of thematic throughout all the work.
This piece here, was that one photograph? It looks, I can see a monster in it.
A monster.
And coming towards us.
An ominous photograph.
Yes.
Good, that's actually great. This piece, it is one photograph that I use the magic of Photoshop to split it in half and mirror it. So it's a mirror image. And I was talking with Diane Kornberg about mirroring. It's kind of one of those artist tricks where you want to use it sparingly because it can become like, oh, just mirror it, like, oh, a go-to of let's make that image interesting by mirroring. And for me, I was interested in the image looking kind of oddly symmetrical. Like nothing in nature is ever perfectly symmetrical. So I wanted it to seem like nature is becoming a little strange. But I also liked that the waves, to me, started to look like bones, like a femur or like parts of a vertebrae. And so I kind of liked that it started to reference the human body, but also death, I thought. So that was kind of my mirroring choice, why I did it.
I love the way it moves. Like it's alive.
Yeah.
I was just curious about the words. Could you talk about what the words are?
Sure.
In Icelandic?
Yeah. They're all in English, actually. And so the text, I work with my husband. He's a poet. so it's our collaboration together. And he takes climate change documents and essentially takes the climate change document and sort of pastes it into these book columns, and then he blacks out certain words. So that's why they look kind of stuttered or like rain. So I formerly enjoyed that, or was excited that happened. But he sort of blacks out words to draw out other pieces of the text to make a poem. So this one, you know, he inserts words and he puts brackets around things he has inserted. So you know it's like he intentionally put it in there. But this one has like a direct address to a reader. So someone who's reading the books. And it's kind of nice because you still see some of the words that came from the climate change document about like adaptation and about migration and scarcity and water. And so those words sort of come out, but they're put into this sort of new, more poetic sort of reading of that text. So if you fold it up, you can actually read it like a book. And I'll show you how it kind of works. So at the top there is a book cover that looks like this, and on the bottom of the floor there is a book cover. And this is kind of a short one, but what I essentially do is I take the book and I hang the book on the wall. So each one of these columns actually folds up into a book. It's an accordion, and so you can read an accordion like a codex book, and a codex is a book that's bound on the left side. And that's kind of a traditional Western book that's bound here. And that we open and we read from left to right, right? That's how most Western readers read. So you can actually open each one of these columns in the gallery, these two, and they read like a book.
And
So.
these are those books over there.
Yeah, so I'll grab a stack of those.
Do you have to get permission from the government to use their verbiage?
Oh, I didn't even try, no. That's interesting. Artists, we steal stuff. But I don't think of it as stealing. I mean, I think of it as everything is ripe for artistic appropriation and for artistic usage. And it's transformed in such a way, even if I directly copied it, I don't think it would be problematic because it's transformed. So it's considered fair use. But I also think it makes the document much more interesting.
Oh, God.
On the very last page, Devin put in 8-point type.
That's right.
From such and such.
That's right. To show our source. That's right.
Well, I don't know why they would, because I don't think anybody's probably read the other one.
So far, I've mostly been working with these strips and columns because I kind of like this sort of geometric framing and sort of crispness, like in contrast with nature, right? So it's kind of this very human sort of way to put pictures of nature in frames and boxes. So I kind of like working with these sort of rigid, almost like grids and columns. Yeah.
It's a way to apprehend it in a way.
Yeah, kind of contain it in a way. Yeah.
So back to your patience, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Back to patience, persistence.
Practice and play. Yeah.
practice. So during the course of any effort, you'll bump up against one of those. Maybe you'll become impatient, perhaps.
Oh yeah.
With the medium. So do you, when you use those, well, it's not an acronym, but the 4 Ps, do you, have you trained yourself to immediately know which one you're up against? As just sort of put it in context kind of a thing?
Not always.
I can't find the green cover I'm looking for.
Yeah, not always. Yeah, I have days in my studio where it does get frustrating, and I think every artist does, right? Or I hope they do. I hope it's, I mean, maybe it is just like easy breezy in some people's studios, but I find that if I'm not running up against something, then I'm not pushing myself in some ways. Like it's good if I'm finding a challenge or I'm running into a little bump, and then I need to remember, like, what would I tell my students right now?
Right.
You know, work through it, be patient, or just keep, maybe I need a skill I don't have, or maybe there's a material I don't have and I just need to go seek it out or learn it or train myself or educate myself. Yeah.
So have you ever torn up one of your books out of frustration?
There's a lot you don't see in the gallery. So artists are, I mean, when we edit, right? We edit a lot when we get to this point.
Yeah.
And so for this piece, Implications, we went through maybe 8 rolls of that Japanese paper because this one's a very thin paper. It was the first piece of all these I did, and the thin paper would pinch as it was going through the inkjet printer, and it would just ruin a 12-foot roll of paper. Like that was it. I couldn't show it. So I have these like rolls of just like misprints, you know.
Tell them how big the rolls are now that go through.
Yeah, they're 44 inches wide and they're 50 feet long. So it's huge.
That weighs a lot.
The rolls. Actually, it's all really pretty compressed. It's like that, and it's about this wide. Yeah, they're really dense. They're big rolls of paper. And you know, they're like
Don't throw them away.
$400 a pop, the rolls, yeah.
You can just think of thousands of ways of using
Oh, they're exactly. And so I have them. I haven't quite torn them all up, though. There's tempting days when I'm like, that project. But yeah, I still play with them and use them for things and collage with them because it's nice paper and interesting prints.
What brought you to Iceland, your project to Iceland?
Yeah, it's a good question. I had visited there once before. I went on the Fulbright grant, you know, just as a tourist and someone who was taking pictures. And so it had sort of drawn me back. I found the landscape pretty magical and captivating. And I was interested as a graduate student. I just got my MFA, and I wanted to have sort of a year after the MFA to just go work. And a Fulbright is actually great for artists. It's a whole year that you can make your art and do residencies. And so I thought about, oh, maybe I can get back to Iceland that way. And I was interested in the landscape. My graduate, thesis work was all about landscape, and so I thought Iceland could be a really good place, especially in light of how visible climate change is there with the glaciers just melting, just disappearing literally. So that was really what drew me there. Yeah. It's a very creative culture there too. It's a neat place for artists. Yeah. I'm trying to kind of reorient my work maybe towards the West more. And by that I just mean like the geographic region of like the American West, and look at climate change instead of these easy images, not easy, but like our go-to kind of like melting ice. Like what about all these places that are drying out in the West, right? That maybe it seems less visible, yet the landscapes are really dramatically different, or there's like species lost, things like that.
Over there?
Yeah, tons of windmills. Like this landscape is really changing. So
They've used energy to their benefit, though, haven't they, in Iceland?
yeah, they have a lot of hydroelectricity. A lot of thermal energy, so I mean they're a pretty green place in many ways, although they do have a lot of big aluminum smelting plants, so yeah, because there's so much clean, cheap energy, so smelting plants want to post up there quite a bit. Yeah.
I have one more question.
Yes.
So I have found in my own work, and I found that technology tends to erode my creativity. Like just looking at the flashing phone or just like grinding on the computer all day tends to, be sort of like the refined sugar of imagery. Do you know what I mean? Like
I do.
I can
Totally
Google
do.
handbags and see where other people are coming from all day and then accomplish nothing and then not want to do anything and go eat sugar.
Yes.
Have
It's
you come
interesting
up
you brought
against
that up. Yes, there's certain kinds of technology that suck the energy out of me, like my smartphone. And I've found that I have to have such good boundaries with media and with my smartphone and with my email at work, because work, I love it and I love my job, but it also takes away from my creative energy. And so there's some kinds of technology that feed it, like I've gotten pretty good at Photoshop, so now it's a tool, right? Or, I use a lot of technology in my work, but those are tools. They don't drain me the way like my email or my office computer does. Yeah, it's
so
like...
how do you set that boundary? Like how do you...
Woo.
You only allow yourself so much time each day on something.
Yeah, and I've also learned to say it's good enough. Like that thing
Your
I
work
just
is good
wrote.
enough?
Yeah, or like my job as a teacher today was good enough.
Yeah.
Or like that document I just wrote and turned in was good enough. Or the email I sent was good enough. It's like, because I can spend hours fretting over an email. Yeah, where I'm like, I gotta really, and I'm like, wait a minute, they don't know I spent that much time on this. Who cares? I should stop. This is energy and time I should give back to myself.
And there's so many things you can send that nobody even responds.
Exactly. Yeah, and also I've learned checking my email all day is a time suck. I was like, check it at certain times, because usually there's a bunch of stuff to delete anyway, or that don't need my response or my time. So I've tried to get that kind of technology under control more, because it will take away from your art. Yeah.
I found that I got away from that kind of, and I can't remember if it was left brain or right brain, but I consider bookmaking a lot of it, most of the time, to be the more cognitive side, which I think is the left side.
Left.
Thank you. So I guess my question is, when does the machine become, and I'm including not just these modern production methods, limiting. And this sort of gets back to what you were saying, because I found after years of doing books that I needed to get into fine art again. I mean, you know, using the hand and the different materials and things. So,
That's a fascinating question.
kind of-
You know, as someone who teaches and works in printmaking and book arts, for us those fields are so closely aligned with machines, right? Like they're necessities to the production of our work. And printmakers and book artists have always borrowed from commercial printing or sort of factory production tools to make our work. And so for me, the only limits with technology and tools is when you don't have the education and finesse to make it do what you want. And I run into that sometimes myself, and I know my students do too, where the machines become frustrating because we don't know how to make them work. Same with computers. I find computers can get frustrating when I'm like, I don't know how to do the thing I want. But I've gotten to a place where most of the things I work with in here, the tools I'm using, I'm comfortable enough where they don't feel like they hinder, but they're just part of the workflow. But that's fascinating, kind of to think about that idea of, you were talking about bookmaking as being almost like rigid or rigorous or like less
Well, I guess
creative,
I'm looking at
perhaps?
the percentage of the time you spend when you're producing.
with the tools.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think
it's a lot of it too.
I liked your word play, because I think that's the side of you that allows you to do more
Yeah.
inventive, or, you know, if you do make a mistake, you don't tear something up. You go
Right.
on and you use what your
Yeah,
mistake was. You know, it's so fascinating to me that
yep,
that a lot of fine artists are fascinated by this kind of stuff. I mean, usually they're doing one-off something, and these images are just mind-blowing. I mean, the landscape in the format that you put it is just mind-blowing to me. It's just wonderful.
and I think actually that's what keeps me working is thinking about the final product, like the vision I have for the final piece. I'm so excited about it that I will sit in my studio and bind, you know, hundreds of books, which is really just like, I'm a craftsperson at that point. I'm a machine. I'm just folding, I'm gluing, I'm folding, I'm gluing, you know, like it isn't romantic and it doesn't seem very creative, but I know I want this. I want this to happen so badly that I put on NPR and I'm just like,
Persistence.
yeah, there's that persistence thing where I'm like, I can do this. It's like the marathon, like this is not fun running right now, but I want to finish.
So about how long would you say that piece took?
Devin and I worked on it together during one summer for about 2.5 months, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day.
So it's not exactly like having a baby. It doesn't take that much. That's not bad.
That's
really,
right.
when you
It's
think
not
about
exactly like having a baby.
Yeah,
The paper baby. the
art
full
babies,
size.
yeah.
it. I mean, it is a creative process, whatever
Yeah.
you do, yeah. Whether it's the mechanical aspect or
Yeah.
not.
But time is an interesting aspect to the creative process because we're so pressed in our lives. Our attention gets drawn in so many directions that finding the time is so difficult. So I often work in these chunks. And I've learned about myself that when I have a busy semester at school or I've got other demands, I may not be very creative. I might be weeks before I'm in my studio, and I try not to be hard on myself and to remember, like, I'll eventually get back in there. I know I can produce stuff and get excited and light up again about my work, but there's moments when I'm like, oh, I don't feel like an artist. I'm only teaching, or I'm only administrating, you know? So it's good to remember creativity is just like up and down depending on what's happening. It's not the perfect, you know, I'm in my studio every day. I wish. I'm sure there's some artists who are, but
We all have.
I know. Or I always wonder, I don't know. Yeah, how does that work? So, yeah.
Are any of these installations and permanent installations in certain places?
They are. This piece, Precipitous, so I do make additions. So as a book artist, I think about additioning. And so there's 3 precipituses. And so there's one, they all come in like a boxed, when the books, they have like a pretty slipcase. And one was bought by the University of California at Santa Barbara. And so they have a really neat special collection about water and climate change. So it was such a perfect fit for them, especially in California where they have so much drought. It was neat that they bought it, so yeah.
Well, which kind of brings me to my last question. Yeah. You know, I'm thinking about these, and my first question was, is it difficult to resist the temptation to produce and sell them? But then my other question was, have you thought or considered producing and selling them as part of the installation in that, you know, that really is getting this document out to the masses.
Right.
Because they're so cool. I mean, you know, once you buttoned it up and, you know, figured out your production, I imagine that there'd be a decent margin. You know, like, sorry, but that's where my brain goes.
Capitalist thinking, all right, I like it for artists.
They're worthy.
Yes.
It's a worthy, you know, maybe the money could go to, I don't know what, but.
Your next roll of paper.
That's right.
Well, it's truly your next roll of paper, but nonetheless, as a piece of work that's quite beautiful and could be quite accessible.
I mean, you bring up such a great point about finding audiences, and that's something all artists, I think, struggle with, is finding and connecting too. You know, I've been in a very sort of academic circle, or academic circles. I get asked by university galleries to show a lot. So I don't have a commercial gallery, and I don't show outside of colleges. So it's honestly about me maybe promoting myself more and just connecting to those kinds of collectors or audiences that want to buy the work. So yeah, that just takes some time. But they could be mass produced. I hadn't thought about that, but commercially printed.
Another thing I can comment on is the anonymous sponsor of this event understood that to bring this here, that particular piece was something they were very specifically interested in. Can't go everywhere.
Right.
I mean, it needs
That much room.
Yep.
you didn't chop one row off. This is the whole thing. Look how close
Fits
it came to the
perfect.
absolute limits of that wall.
Yeah, it fits perfect.
And she doesn't want to have
Yep.
them a quarter inch away from each other. Correct me if I'm wrong, you wanted those spaces. And so,
Inch and a quarter, yeah.
you know, lots of places won't be able to accommodate that.
That's true.
Either their ceiling height or whatever, so
That's right.
it's not in the books, of course, but the books without this, just to pick on one, without this to go with it, she can't stand there all the time and explain it.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, so it helps when I do have editions and I can show, you know, this is the stack of books that is that, right? They're the exact same thing.
I want it.
The stack of
I
books.
mean, they're just fantastic, and that's where my mind goes. But it's been trying to put on.
That's great. Oh, that's good. I need to think more like that.
No.
well, that was more an accident than deliberate.
Well, it works out
More
beautifully.
necessity than,
And the same
It worked
thing
out.
here, because it does really, this in a really huge room with lots of wall space might not quite have the same impact, but the way they shorten these up,
Yep.
they just centers on it. It's beautiful, beautifully done.
That's what we want, for it to feel intentional.
Yeah.
There you go. Perfect.
So your books are 9 editions, is that the set? Is that?
Actually, this is one edition. So this is, the whole edition is 9 books. And so the second edition is another 9 books, which is that. Yep.
Right.
Is that right? Yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah.
that's okay, I
Yeah.
can give clarity now.
I was like, yeah. Yeah, of course, of course. Just be careful. Opening them, you just want to hold the spine, because otherwise they're like little snakes and they'll slip out of your hands. Does anybody else want to hold one?
This is a rare opportunity because
It's true.
basically it's a do not touch exhibition.
Yeah.
No food, no drink, no touch without little white gloves with docent.
I'll just touch it. You
I
can
like
touch
this book
one.
cloth. I think this book cloth's pretty. And when you see them in the book form, you can actually read Devin's text. So these are poems. He's been working on a series where he takes a word out of the Oxford English Dictionary, and then he excises language in poems from the definitions of that word. So they're kind of cool.
They're so wonderful. I just feel so blessed and privileged.
Oh.